Welcome to Question Period on this Sunday, December 21st. I'm Vassy Kapelos. Today, the leader of the official opposition.
Then he should get that mandate from Canadians in an election, not through dirty backroom deals.
How is it his fault that people left your party? Pierre Poilievre is dismissing caucus defections as undemocratic as the Conservative leader faces renewed scrutiny of his own leadership. He's lost 2 MPs to the governing Liberals, and speculation swirls the floor crossing won't stop there. All of this ahead of his own pivotal leadership review vote in the new year. Can Poilievre rule out more defections? I go one-on-one with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Then, that's a wrap.
I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
2025 was as far from boring as you can get. We saw the fall of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
I feel like everything in my life has helped prepare me for this moment.
The rise of Liberal leader Mark Carney.
That we didn't quite get over the finish line yet.
Vive le Canada. Thank you very much.
A stunning election result.
Mexico and Canada have taken advantage of the United States.
And a spiraling trade war with our closest ally. What should we make of the year that was, and what should we anticipate for the year that will be? The Sunday strategy session is here, plus a special edition of The Scrum. We'll start today with the leader of the official opposition. Pierre Poilievre is heading into the holidays down 3 MPs. 2, Chris D'Entremont and Michael Mah, defected to the governing Liberals. A third, Matt Jeneroux, amid rumors he would cross the floor as well, instead announced he would resign as an MP entirely in the spring. The floor crossings put Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberals just 1 seat shy of a majority government. So how is the Conservative leader reflecting on his own leadership? Pierre Poilievre joined me in studio earlier this week. Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Welcome back to studio. Thank you so much for making the time.
Merry Christmas. Good to be back.
Merry Christmas to you and your family as well. I want to start off, I have a number of questions on inflation and pipelines, but I do want to start off on the political events of the last week. Can you tell supporters of your party who are watching right now that there will not be more MPs who leave the Conservatives for the Liberal Party?
Well, what I can tell them is that everyone who ran for the Conservatives ran on our platform to make this an affordable, safe country, and to do the opposite of what the Liberals have done, which is to drive up inflation, double the deficit, unleash crime. And so anybody who has crossed the floor has gone against the affordable safety platform that we put forward in the last election. And I think Canadians have a reasonable expectation that when you run on a platform to bring down the cost of living, to control spending, to lock up criminals, that you shouldn't then go and join the party that's doing precisely the opposite.
I do understand that expectation, but I also remember covering back in September of 2018 when Leona Alislev made the converse decision to leave the Liberals, come to the Conservative Party. You were a member of caucus. I remember the caucus rising and applauding her, giving her a standing ovation as she made her way into the room. I remember Andrew Scheer at the time, now you're House Leader, then the leader of the party, saying disenfranchised Liberal supporters are wanted and needed in the Conservative Party. Why was it okay then and terrible now?
Well, first of all, I think there's occasions when people have a difference of principle, or their party goes against what the party had run on in the last election. In other words, the party leaves them rather than them leaving the party, and that's not the case here. The members in question openly criticized Mark Carney for doubling the deficit. One of them even said that the grocery prices that Mark Carney is imposing on Canadians are inhumane, and that's a quote. So to then, within weeks, go and support those inhumane grocery prices, that rampaging deficit, the soft on crime laws goes directly against what they ran on. But it has basically renewed my commitment to do the job that Canadians, roughly 8.1 million Canadians voted to send us here to do, which is to fight for an affordable Canada so that people can actually go to a grocery store and buy a basket of goods, feed their family without feeling anxious that their bank account has been emptied.
And I do have a lot of questions for you on how you would navigate that
Right.
if you were going to become Prime Minister. But when you say, for example, that what this MP Michael Mah is doing or Chris D'Entremont is different than Leona Alislev, I fail to see how that's the case. She also criticized the Conservative Party on multiple occasions. She left. She became not only a member of your party, but the deputy leader of the party. I didn't hear you at the time say, this is an abhorrent thing. How could this happen in the way that you're saying right now?
Well, I remember at the time she was saying that the Liberals were then driving the deficit out of control. They were leading to rising living costs, that they had a soft on crime policy that was not consistent with what she expected. And that's why we have to focus on making the lives of Canadians safe and affordable again. That has been my mission in this session of Parliament. And it's certainly going to be the mission when we get back, because frankly, people need hope again that things can get better and that they don't have to live in an unaffordable, unsafe country where they're in debt and in danger, that things can actually get better. We're the only party that will make them better.
I didn't hear you say that you unequivocally don't think other MPs will leave for the Liberals. I asked because two Liberal ministers, Minister McKinnon, Minister Hodgson, have both intimated that there are others who have approached them. If MPs in your party were happy with you and your leadership, wouldn't they stay?
Well, I think the ministers you just mentioned, along with Mr. Carney, are trying to manipulate an undemocratic majority that Canadians rejected that would drive up grocery prices, housing costs, and crime. Canadians voted against the rampant inflation Liberals have caused. They voted against out-of-control spending. They voted against the soft on crime laws and the open border immigration policies that Liberals have imposed. And if Mark Carney believes that he should have a majority to go ahead with the high-cost policies he's running on, then he should get that mandate from Canadians in an election, not through dirty backroom deals.
How is it his fault that people left your party? I can't even understand the argument after one MP. Two MPs. The third MP doesn't want to be in politics anymore after rumors that he was also going to cross the floor. At what point is it not about them and it about you, with great respect?
Well, with great respect, Mr. Carney has said that he wants to get a majority, not by winning in a majority government election, but by making backroom deals in order to get floor crossers. And
but the
Canadians
Conservatives made backroom deals too.
Canadians specifically rejected a Liberal majority in the last election. The vast majority of voters voted against that majority because they knew that it would mean a higher cost of living, that they would be unsafe in their streets. And it is undemocratic through a series of backroom deals, Mr. Carney to try and concentrate more power and money in his own hands rather than allowing the Canadian people's decision to stand. So we believe in holding the government to account for the broken promises, but also proposing positive ideas that will make life more affordable and safer. That's what we've done for the session, and that's what we're going to be doing in the new Parliament.
If you can't convince your entire own caucus of that, how will you convince Canadians?
Well, how will I convince Canadians? We'll be going into communities, into community halls, meeting with people at grocery stores and coffee shops, to talk to them about getting rid of the industrial carbon tax, lowering the income taxes, cutting back on the new fuel taxes Liberals are bringing in, so that people can actually afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. So that's how we're going to do it.
But I'll put to you again, you could not convince two of your own MPs that those ideas were enough to stay in the party under your leadership. And again, I'll put to you with great respect, I look at public opinion polling. Every single one of them has your party and the Liberals neck and neck, within 1 or 2 points of each other. But when you look deeper at your own personal numbers, the divide between you and the leader of the Liberal Party, the Prime Minister, is far more significant. You were supposed to win this election, you lost it, you didn't hold your own seat. You have now lost 3 MPs. At what point are you a liability to the Conservative Party?
Well, we added 2.5 million votes. We had the biggest vote count in our party's history. We got 25 more seats, the biggest share of votes since 1988. Why? Because I ran on restoring the promise of this country, that anybody who works hard gets a good life, gets an affordable home, a safe street, and that vision brought people to our party in record numbers. We've led the debate on inflation, carbon taxes, crime, immigration, natural resources, drugs, and more, to the point where the Liberals have to plagiarize our words, even though if they don't actually put them into practice. So we've been driving the debate under my leadership, and we're going to continue to demonstrate that if Canadians want those policies that Liberals keep pretending to support, they're actually going to have to vote for the real deal in the next election.
But you lost. At the end of the day, you lost, right? And I just don't understand kind of how, after all of that, and I'm not taking away from the election result, the significance of it, and certainly I've directed a lot of those questions at the Liberals to try and hold them to account. But there is absolutely zero sense of contrition on your part, particularly after the loss of these 2 MPs. Why?
Well, I'm very troubled that they made that decision, but the people in their ridings voted for the Conservative agenda that I'm continually leading on in the House of Commons, again, which is to make this country affordable once again. And I'm fighting, I'm not, we focus a lot on the palace intrigue of Parliament Hill. We need to focus on the real lives of Canadians who can't afford to eat right now. We've got 2.2 million visits to a food bank every single month. That is twice what it was just a decade ago, a number that's increasing this year. Next year, grocery prices are expected to go up another $1,000. Family of four will be spending $17,600. So I appreciate the obsession around this place with the palace intrigue and the interpersonal debates, but what really matters is whether people can actually put food on the dinner table every night. And I'm the only one who's been consistently championing the right of people who work hard to have decent food, to have a good home, to live on a safe street, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
The impetus, I think, though, is there's an intersection there. The palace intrigue could give, just in one more seat, which the Liberals intimate is very possible, the Liberals a majority, which will greatly impact the policy direction that this country takes. So that's why I think Canadians very fairly have questions about what is going to happen and what you're prepared to do to stop it. On the policy agenda that you talk about, I do want to talk about inflation because we've got new numbers out from Statistics Canada this week, in particular about grocery prices, and you flagged some of it right there. Another 4.7% higher in this November than it was last November. You have consistently laid the blame for that at the Prime Minister's feet. You've also more specifically blamed high government spending, big government deficits, which this deficit objectively is very high. If that were the case, though, wouldn't core inflation also be increasing at the same rate as those grocery prices? The answer to that question is coming up next on Question Period. Welcome back to Question Period. Before the break, we brought you part one of our conversation with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Here's part two. I do want to talk about inflation because we've got new numbers out from Statistics Canada this week, in particular about grocery prices, and you flagged some of it right there. Another 4.7% higher in this November than it was last November. You have consistently laid the blame for that at the Prime Minister's feet. You've also more specifically blamed high government spending, big government deficits, which this deficit objectively is very high. If that were the case, though, wouldn't core inflation also be increasing at the same rate as those grocery prices?
It is increasing. It's been between 2.8 and 3% ever since Mr. Carney became Prime Minister, which is not, the target is 2. When it's at 3, that's not 1% higher, that's 50% higher. And people feel that in higher costs for food is the worst offender right now, of course, 4.7 or 4.8%. But not only food, other basic essentials are going up. Rent has been going up. The cost of fuel, if you take out the temporary effect of the carbon tax, has been going up. So Canadians can't afford this government. And it's very simple. When you're creating cash faster than you're creating the stuff cash buys, you have inflation. And that is one of the reasons why prices continue to rise, and for many people rise faster than their incomes. It's why we have a record number of people lined up at food banks. It's why we meet people every single day who tell me they simply cannot afford to put food on the table anymore. People with jobs who work 50, 60 hours a week are going to food banks for the first time in their lives because of the higher cost that this Liberal government is imposing, yes, through its deficits, but also through its hidden grocery taxes.
I want to unpack some of that because I understand exactly what you mean about people. They approach us, they talk about this as well. We represent it on our newscast and we talk about it frequently. And it is not to take away from that I ask you questions about the policies you say would ameliorate that situation for them. But when I pose to you the difference between food inflation, for example, and regular inflation, the core inflation number in November is down 2.8%. As you said, it was originally 3%.
Which is what's the target?
The target is between 2 and 3%. It is within the target range right now, inflation. I'm just saying the difference between food and like if it were all government spending, wouldn't it all be out of control? And it's not. There are other factors at play, including those detailed by Statistics Canada in their report released this week. Things like weather conditions, cattle supply, things like that.
So first of all, the target is not between 2 and 3%. The target is 2%. The range is 1 to 3, and we're at the top of the range and on the verge of going over it. For food prices, it's 4.8, and Canadians will be forced to spend an extra $1,000 next year on groceries for a total of $17,600, an almost unbelievable amount of money, an amount that is doubled under the Liberal government. It is true that that inflation is too high across the board. Food is worse. Now, why is inflation high across the board? Because the government is running a $78 billion deficit. They're creating more cash. That bids up the price of goods. Why is food worse? Because on top of the monetary inflation of printing money, you've got a bunch of extra hidden taxes. You've got the industrial carbon tax, which applies on farm equipment, fertilizer, food processors. You've got the food packaging tax. They're banning single-use plastics. Sounds like a nice idea until you learn that it makes food go bad 4 days faster, and all that food waste goes on your grocery bill. Then you've got the fuel standard tax, which is going to hit 7 cents a liter next year. That hits farmers. There's no farm exemption on that, by the way. Even the horrible carbon tax, at least they had a colored fuel exemption for farm equipment. This is going to be a tax directly on tractors and combines and on the truckers that bring us food. And then, of course, you've got the deficit. So all of these things these are all liberal policies that drive up the cost of food and everything else, and that's why we need to cut the taxes, but also cut the wasteful spending to bring down that crazy deficit.
But two of those things that you flagged, for example, the packaging stuff that's about to come, the clean fuel regulations, all of those are things that are to come into effect in the future at the level that you have described and that all your press releases talk about. That's not actually what's happening right now. So are you not misrepresenting, again, the truth, the full picture? Like you want Canadians to believe everything is the government's fault. Some of it is, but not all of it.
So those things are in place right now. The industrial carbon tax is in place right now.
But your own language said is going to be. Like the industrial carbon tax, yes, but the food packaging and the clean fuel regulations.
The packaging tax is already in place. The fuel standard is in place as well. I said next year it's rising even more to 7 cents a liter. I think it's 3 or 4 right now. So these policies are in place already. You're right to say they are going to get worse the longer the Liberals are in power, because they have an accelerator on all of those taxes, but they are in place right now and they have real costs today.
But is it fair to say that it's just that stuff? Like, why isn't Statistics Canada, who used to, for example, isolate the carbon tax and driving up the price of gasoline and be honest with Canadians about that, why are they not saying, here are all the things that the government is doing that is wrong, that is leading to these excessive prices? Instead, they're very specific in highlighting higher beef prices have been driven in part by lower cattle inventories in North America. Coffee prices have been impacted by adverse weather conditions in growing regions. Like, there are other reasons, and you don't want to concede that at all.
Well, if there were just a bunch of sporadic reasons that are scattered across the world, then you would presume there would be other things that would favor price reductions and cancel them out. But it's not just coffee and beef and lettuce. It's groceries across the board are more expensive. It doesn't matter if you're buying a loaf of bread or a bag of peanuts, you're paying more for everything, vastly more. And let's be clear, the cost of groceries for a family of 4 has roughly doubled under this Liberal government. That's not because there was a 1-year drought for coffee bean growers in Brazil this year. This has been a consistent trend since the Liberal government took office, and in particular in the last 5 years, while Carney was Trudeau's economic advisor, while they started printing money and accelerating their tax increases on fuel and energy, that is when we have started to see the worst inflation, just as I predicted we would, and it will get worse as long as they keep taxing and spending money that Canadians can't afford.
So let me maybe get you on the record then, Mr. Poilievre. If you, as promised, remove all of these, just as you said you would remove the consumer carbon price, will groceries become cheap?
Food should be really cheap in Canada because we have the most farmland anywhere, I think the 5th most farmland anywhere in the world. This is what's so frustrating. Everything should be dirt cheap in Canada because we have the most dirt. We have the most dirt to grow food on, the most dirt to build houses on, the most dirt to produce energy from, we have the 3rd biggest supply of oil. It should be cheap to buy these things in Canada. We should be the most affordable country in the world, yet why are we one of the most expensive? Government, taxes on home building, taxes on energy, government money printing, blocking us from producing our resources, which artificially suppresses the Canadian dollar. And when you have a weak dollar, you have less buying power. The cost of living crisis is entirely government made, and that is what is so frustrating about it.
Respectfully, though, my question was, if you remove, as you allege, all of these policies that are the sole contributor to inflation, which I counter, I don't know if that's the whole picture, but let's say what you say is true and they all are, and you're prime minister and you do all that, will Canadians have cheap food prices?
Savings.
Because when the carbon price was removed, they did not.
Because they brought in
They
two
didn't
or
bring
three
it in,
other
they already
carbon
had
taxes,
it.
right?
We litigated this before.
Yes, but
yeah.
they're increasing, and you can't, so the Liberals take one hand out of your right pocket and put two or three hands in your left pocket, and they ask you to thank them for it. I said I would axe all of the carbon taxes, and I would cut other taxes as well, and that's how we're going to make life affordable. And I wouldn't be running a $78 billion money printing deficit right now. I would be bringing the deficit down. So it is the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. That's why Canadians cannot afford to live. And it's precisely why Conservatives are calling for an affordable government so that Canadians can have an affordable life.
I've gone over my allotted time. I apologize. One final question, if you'll
Sure.
permit me, on the palace intrigue. If you do ultimately lose another MP and the Liberals form a majority, will you stay on as leader?
That'll be up to the members of our party, because our party is not run by backroom deals in Ottawa, but by the welders and waitresses, soldiers and police officers, small business people who actually join the party and come to our convention. I am fighting for them. I'm fighting for them every day and in every way, and they will decide in the convention if they want me to stay on.
But you'll be at that convention no matter what.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Poilievre.
I'll see you
Appreciate
there.
it as always. You bet. We'll be there.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
That was Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Prime Minister Mark Carney was not made available to CTV News for an end-of-year interview. We're going to take a quick break on today's question period, but when we come back, roles reversed. This time last year, Justin Trudeau's leadership was on the line. Is it Poilievre's turn? The Sunday strategy session with Kathleen, Kory, Teneycke, and Scott Reid will tackle that next. If you do ultimately lose another MP and the Liberals form a majority, will you stay on as leader?
That'll be up to the members of our party, because our party is not run by backroom deals in Ottawa.
But you'll be at that convention no matter what.
Yes.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the future of his leadership will be in the party membership's hands come January. Our Sunday strategy session is here to talk about that, the year that was, and what could happen next year. Kathleen Monk is a former NDP strategist and director of communications to the late Jack Layton. Kory Teneycke was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former director of communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And Scott Reid is a former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody. It's very nice to see you today on this last edition of our Strats for the year. Kory, I'll start with you. I think there have been lots of questions over the past few weeks around Mr. Poilievre's leadership because of these floor crossers. How do you think the party membership is going to reconcile the idea that it is what he's focused on in his leadership that brought the party to these new heights, but at the same time appears to be a liability in other areas?
Well, the membership and people who voted for the party and then the people who are going to vote at the convention, those are all three different groups of people. So I don't think the most recent floor crossing will really factor in a ton into the leadership vote, in that the delegates have already been selected, prior to that happening. So that voting pool is already set, and it usually biases itself towards the incumbent leader. So, I don't foresee any problem for Poilievre at the vote at the convention, but that doesn't mean that he's out of the woods with respect to caucus. If we look back in history as to how leaders tend to get deposed over time, and I guess John Rustad would be a good recent example of that. You can win a leadership vote and then have questions around your leadership persist. And I think if you're Poilievre and his team, you've got to be hoping that won't be the case here, and that you can stop these floor crossings from continuing to happen, and lay down an attack narrative around the government that gets some traction.
The government and some ministers in particular, Scott, have been pretty interestingly open about the idea that there are potential other floor crossers. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they might be making mischief, or they might know something we don't. They certainly have been teasing that possibility. And I really take my lead from how Pierre Poilievre responded to that question when you interviewed him. And I thought it was fascinating. I mean, you want to talk about defensive. If he'd shown up with a hockey helmet and goalie pads, he couldn't have looked more defensive in that interview. And the reason is that he's inherently working from a defensive posture. When you asked him that question, will there be more defections? Might you even lose the parliamentary majority to caucus defections? he couldn't dismiss the possibility. All he could do was denigrate that possibility. And I thought that was very, very telling, because he doesn't know. So if the ministers think they know something we don't, Pierre Poilievre also doesn't know. And it leaves him in a really weak position. Now, his messaging on it's a bad idea to secure a majority through parliamentary defections, he might find some traction in the public with that. And Kory and I have talked about that before. We don't agree, but I think there could be some traction as people go, that sounds wrong to me. But nevertheless, it leaves Poilievre as the mayor of Losertown. I mean, he's literally talking on air about the possibility of losing the majority after, as you pointed out in your interview, he lost an election he was supposed to win. He lost a seat, which was supposed to be a lock, and now he's losing members of his own caucus. And so this is not a confident, forward-looking leader at this point. He is, by definition, in a defensive posture, talking about why it would be terrible if more terrible things happen to him. This guy needs to get some W's in 2026, starting with that leadership review, because it's all bad right now.
I do think, though, you can also interpret from the fact that he is taking questions, and in particular from the mainstream on this, that he is still fighting. Like he does still want to fight to lead the party.
For sure. And these next 6 weeks are going to be crucial, where he lays out a plan of where he's going to take the party going forward. Because the problem with the Conservatives is they have really great polling numbers, but it masks the larger structural problem about Pierre Poilievre's actual viability. Last year at this time we were talking about Trudeau, and people were frustrated. There was flags out in the street, right? And people had fatigue with Trudeau and wanted him to go. But there weren't the floor crossers, right? There were members of his cabinet who decided to resign, who decided to leave, but there weren't people who were actively jumping from one party to another. And that's the problem that Pierre right now is dealing with.
Even when they're at 40 points in the polls, as you
their polling numbers are great, but it really does mask the challenge that it's not just about motivating your base and having committed voters say that they like the leader. His negatives are high, and he needs to actually think of a campaign to actually broaden the base. And I really do think it's a question of viability. Is he viable as a leader for the Conservative Party if they want to form government? Have Canadians, Canadians said they saw Trudeau, they didn't like him, they had enough of him. But now the question is, they know Pierre Poilievre, and will they ever actually vote for him for Prime Minister?
Kathleen brings us down, Kory, memory lane, a year ago when Justin Trudeau was still Prime Minister for a few more weeks. When you look back on this year, what defines it politically for you?
Well, I think probably the biggest story of the year is, you can frame it one of two ways: the Liberal resurgence or the collapse of what looked like an absolute certainty for the Conservatives in the election campaign. And I think that's the biggest story. It's probably, if we look back historically, the biggest reversal of fortunes in Canadian political history. And you don't see that very often. That's the biggest. I think that's the biggest story. And to Kathleen's point, what we're seeing now, it's not a polling problem for the Conservatives. It's a polling problem for Poilievre. Yeah. And the party is quite popular by historical standards on most of the issues that are actually driving those polling numbers. The Conservatives have a substantial issue advantage, and I think it'd be very high in the polls if not for Poilievre's very weak leadership numbers. And this is what's driving the floor crossing. And ultimately, I think is what will determine his fate. Either Poilievre, figures out how to soften his image and bring those personal numbers up, or he's going to have a really difficult year.
What defines this year of politics for you, Scott?
Well, it is hard to lay off what is, as Kory mentioned, a truly historic reversal of fortunes. Mark Carney comes out of nowhere, never held elected office, takes over the leadership in a walk, which wasn't expected to be a walk, and then wins government against an opponent who was supposed to crush everybody. So that's one hell of a story. But to me, the big story and one of the underlying causes of all of that phenomenon, Donald Trump and tariff policy toward Canada. I mean, he has literally declared Canada an enemy, and he's moved aggressively to try to undermine not just free trade, but some of the tenets of our economy. And so we've seen that drive our politics in 2025, that drove that federal election. One of the dynamics that created so many doubts about Mr. Poilievre and his leadership was whether he was up to that moment. And by wide enough margin to hand Mark Carney a near majority, Canadians concluded that he was not up to it. And again, it's Trump that looms in the background. And sneak peek, Trump is still there for us.
Well, yeah, it's going to get really calm next year with Cosmo Review, right?
Yeah.
Right. Last word to you, Kathleen. What defined the year politically?
Yeah, so obviously Scott and Kory are right in terms of what the big stories are. So I'll try to turn to tell viewers about a couple other stories that I think are really important. I think number one, I think last year we were sitting here and we were thinking about who could potential Liberal leaders be. And I think a lot of people said at the time that Mark Carney was too new to politics, wouldn't be able to survive. And that often when we parachuted kind of people in from the private sector quickly or academia, in the case of Michael Ignatieff, into politics, they don't always survive. Well, so far it looks like he's kind of survived. And I would also add one, story that was really obviously important to me. 10 years ago, New Democrats had over 100 seats. In this last election in April, they went down to 7. Haven't been that low or even near that low in over 3 decades. So that's a story, and it has actually created almost a polarization of politics in Canada, and whether that remains in terms of two parties or whether it continues to diversify, as I think Canadians truly want, a multi-party system, is kind of the question that I'm looking at for 2026.
Well, that leads us right into our next segment. After a short commercial break, we're going to ask each of our panelists what the biggest challenge their political party will face next year. We're back with that conversation and our strats in a moment. 2025 was a whirlwind politically. We saw the fall of one prime minister and the rise of a new one, a stunning electoral result at the ballot box, and spiraling relations with the United States. What's the biggest challenge each political party in this country will face next year? Our Sunday strategy session is back. Kathleen, Kory, and Scott. Scott, I'll start this round with you. What is the biggest challenge next year for the Liberals?
Well, I'll cheat and say I see 2 of them. The first, obviously, is Donald Trump and what he plans to do with CUSMA. There's a CUSMA review coming up. We've recently heard from the Prime Minister, from Dom LeBlanc, saying they don't think it's an automatic lock that Trump is going to try to dismantle North American free trade. I hope they're right, because I think he does want to dismantle North American free trade. I think he wants 2 bilateral deals. I think he wants to impose a bunch of new sectoral tariffs, and I think that's going to cause huge disruption to our economy. Even the threat of it happening is going to cause massive shocks. I think it's going to be an enormous challenge. It's an enormous challenge for Prime Minister Carney, be an enormous challenge for anybody who's in government. The second, more particular to the government, more particular to all Liberals, ego. Ego, man. And, I think a lot of Liberals look back on 2025 and all that we've just discussed, and they say, we were kissed by karma. It'll never end, right? It goes on forever. Like, what goes up stays up. Maybe not. And Pierre Poilievre, as hard as times look for him, you can't dismiss the possibility that this guy could come back. You can't dismiss the numbers where he's polling above 40%, his party at least. So I would take nothing for granted. And if there's one disease that afflicts Liberals in office, I should know it is ego.
Kory, what do you think about that? And then what do you think the biggest challenge for the Conservatives is this year?
Well, I completely agree with Scott in terms of what the challenges are for the Liberals.
Thank you.
The ego part, yeah.
But humility is always a challenge when you're on top. But look, I think for the Conservatives, the challenge is that Carney is basically running a 4th term of a Harper government. It's trying to find the right attack vector with a government that's implementing a bunch of things that are popular with your members and popular with the conservative voting pool out there. It is a thing. The Liberals are, as a party, are not as popular as Carney is, and the reason with Conservatives is that's a challenge. You have an MOU with Alberta that is being supported by Daniel Smith. There'll probably be in the next coming weeks MOU with Saskatchewan that'll be popular with Scott Moe. And you saw an announcement on Thursday with Premier Ford and the Prime Minister around resource development that is very popular with Conservatives at the provincial level in Ontario, and so on and so forth. So, you have a Carney government that's doing a lot of things that, quite frankly, a lot of Conservatives like. And so trying to figure out what the right attack vector is challenging in that circumstance. So I think they've tried a few different messages. I don't think they've landed on one that is getting a ton of traction at this point. And so I think the biggest challenge for them this year, aside from Poilievre securing his leadership in some sort of sustainable way, is to figure out what that attack vector is, and to start chipping away at the Liberals' support.
What do you think about that, Kathleen? And then the biggest challenge for the NDP?
Yeah, I think that the problem, as I mentioned before, with the Conservatives is that they're going to have to actually figure out how they can tell Canadians that they can actually govern and not just oppose. Because, like he has done such an effective job at attacking, but people that don't seem to like him as an individual. The Liberals, I think Carney's biggest risk, frankly, Scott has just called it ego. I would call it a concern that he is too corporate, that his centralization of power and his refusal to consult even sometimes his own cabinet members may backfire when things get really tough. In terms of New Democrats, their challenge is relevancy. It's not actually finding a new leader. It's not finding new policy or new ideology, whatever values they want to go down. It's actually being relevant in this particular parliament and this democracy that is Canada. We have to think through what the political oxygen is going to be for New Democrats, how they can get some life back in them with all the chaos that's going on in terms of Trump that my colleagues have mentioned, all the chaos that will continue with the Conservative leadership, because I don't think that's going to be calm waters for the Conservatives for some time. How do New Democrats punch through and actually make a difference? And how do they actually show that they can govern as well? Look to the examples of British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, that have been successful in the past. There's going to be a desire to kind of pivot hard left, because that's what feeds the algorithm. That's what juices people up and gets people involved in politics. But if they really want to be a party that represents Canadians and can actually achieve power, they're going to have to look for successful examples of where New Democrats have done that in the past.
I have a minute left, so I'll do one quick round jumping off that point, because I think the question of the NDP really factors into the question I want to pose to all of you, which is, do you think there's going to be an election next year? Scott?
Yes. I just think it makes sense for the Prime Minister at some point, if he has a lead and if he's holding off economic chaos, to try to bank that majority. So I don't know if that's going to come in late spring or the fall, but if I was in the Prime Minister's office, I'd be saying, let's look for our opening and take it.
Kory, do you think there will be an election next year?
I do, but I'll put the following caveat on it. If the Prime Minister secures, call it not, one, but, 2 or 3 additional MPs as floor crossers, then I think there won't be, because I think Carney is mostly interested in governing. But to do that, he needs to have a majority. And so if he's able to secure that with additional floor crossers, there won't. If he's unable to do that, then I'm with Scott. I think, it could be as soon as the spring.
The last prediction goes to you, Kathleen.
First of all, I want to, next year we should re-roll tape, and actually look at our
That's why I asked the question.
I think if we re-rolled last year, things would be a bit different too. But I'm going to say no. I'm going to say Carney will try to go by stealth, majority by stealth. Put some money on it. I think we put wine on this last year, actually. I think Kory owes me. But
I do, in fact, I do.
But I do think that there won't be an election, and I think he may be able to secure his majority.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Guys, the happiest of holidays. Merry Christmas. Thanks for all that you've done for us over the past year. It's been a blast. Our Sunday strategy session. Kathleen Monk, Kory Teneycke, and Scott Reid. Coming up, we'll take a closer look at the definitive political moments of the year with our scrum. Nick Nanos, Joel-Denis, Bellavance, and Judy Trinh are with us next. Welcome back to Question Period. We are reflecting on the moments that defined 2025 and looking ahead to the moments that could define 2026. To do that, we have a special edition of The Scrum. Nick Nanos is the Chief Data Scientist at Nanos Research. Next to him, that's Joel-Denis Bellavance. He's the Ottawa Bureau Chief at La Presse. And Judy Trinh rounds us out. She's a Senior Correspondent here at CTV National News. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Good to see you. Happiest of the holiday season. Nick, I'll start with you. I think for most of us, what defined the politics of last year was what happened in the thing that you do, which is the most massive swing in public opinion polling nationally I've ever seen. Does that define it for you?
Oh, you mean the deathbed resurrection
Right.
of the Liberals?
Right.
I think we've got to call it for what it was.
Yeah.
Because a year ago, think of it this way, Vassy, a year ago this week, the Liberals were in the 20s. Justin Trudeau was the leader of the Liberal Party. They were 14 points lower than they were today. And everyone had written them off. And, fast forward now, the Liberals are still in power. Mark Carney is the new leader of the Liberals and the Prime Minister. And Pierre Poilievre, his polling numbers were pretty good a year ago, but his personal numbers have been diminishing over time. So it's been a complete reversal of fortune from a ballot perspective.
Do you see any evidence, JD, that the scope, the magnitude of all of that switched has been internalized by any of the political parties?
The Liberal Party, yes, I think they've internalized that, and I think because they remain in power. But I would say that the Conservative Party is still adjusting to the new reality, and the reasons why is that they have been losing MPs to the Liberal Party, 2 MPs so far, and possibly more in the coming weeks, and also adjusting to the new political reality, dealing with the United States. And my sense is that the Conservative Party did not adjust properly during the federal elections. That helped the Liberals, because the Liberals were seen as the best party to defend Canada against Donald Trump.
That has certainly evolved, not necessarily the public's view, but the way in which the Liberals, Judy, are saying they're going to do that, right? Like, if we've been looking all week back at sort of the year that was, and you listen to some of the clips from the Prime Minister during the election campaign, don't take our land, you're not going to take our resources. Like, wow, has the rhetoric changed quite significantly, to most recently kind of that facial expression when Doug Ford was talking about his anti-tariff ad, like the Prime Minister wasn't happy with that.
No, and I think what defines Mark Carney for me this year is March 9th, when he won the Liberal leadership. And what the phrase was, I know how the world works, right? So that type of confidence is his double-edged sword, because it can tip over into hubris. And what we saw was that, he has this ability, because of his glittering resume, to bring $70 billion in a pledge from the UAE, because he's in the room with those sovereign wealth leaders. But at the same time, that attitude angers First Nations and Indigenous groups, because of they feel sidelined. So I'm interested to see how he is going to navigate those relations in the next year.
I think part of what Judy references there is a couple of interesting proof points that will arrive next year, right? We've talked frequently on this panel about the kind of ambition that the Prime Minister describes or talks about, or the rhetoric he employs, which is so unlike what we're used to. But the promises so far, they're so massive, I really don't understand how they're going to deliver on them, but the delivery will be expected next year, I imagine, Nick.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is for a lot of Canadians, it's probably show me the jobs. Right? Yeah. Because Canadians are worried about paying for the bills. They're worried about their job security. They're worried about trade with the United States. And many of these initiatives that Mark Carney has kind of embarked on have long-term implications. These are not short-term projects. And the question is how will they navigate the short term when Canadians are worried about paying for the groceries this week, they're worried about paying for housing this week, and wondering what will happen on the jobs front?
There are a couple of things, like the building of the projects is more long term, but approving one, getting a shovel in the ground, JD, getting a deal of some sorts with the United States, those are all things that I think many Canadians believe should materialize in some way next year. What kind of pressures do you think the government will face?
A lot of pressure, because, as you mentioned, our relationship with the United States is being redefined, and Mr. Carney is trying to redefine it in a way that Canada will be less dependent on the United States market. And I would see that the federal budget is trying to plant the seeds of the new economy, the new Canadian economy, and that's going to be a long term. When you plant a seed, it takes a while before you see the rose, and that's the gamble the government is taking. But as Nick mentioned, I think the Prime Minister and the government will have to say we need to be patient, because what we're doing will take some time to materialize.
It will be interesting to see the way in which the opposition navigates that, because I think that there is a lot of opening there for opposition critique on execution. If time ends up being on their side. The question, though, with the leadership review in January, of course, where the Conservatives are concerned, is will time be on their side?
Well, Mark Carney has that goal-keeping background, right? So he's been good at defending Canada, but he has yet to score goals, right? So, and I think that's what the Conservatives are going to constantly go after. One thing that I'm looking forward to when it comes to diversification, our second biggest trading partner is China. There is a state visit being planned this year. During the APEC summit, Carney actually said that they talked to Xi Jinping about foreign interference and that Canada has the structures in place. So if we are going to expand trade with China, do we really have the structure in place? And our colleagues will know that June 2024 was when they passed Bill C-70, and by all the parties had support for the Foreign Influence Registry. That is supposed to be a safeguard. That is not yet in place. Yet we are going to expand trade with a country that just a few short months ago we deemed the greatest threat. The Prime Minister actually said that.
During the debate. I have 1 minute left. I want to ask all of you what I've been asking our guests today. And we talked about this last time. Is there going to be an election next year, do you think, Nick?
Yep.
Okay, that was a very simple answer. Thank you.
I changed my mind. I thought it would be a spring
Yeah.
election, but no longer. I think the Prime Minister will get a majority. The next time he answers a question from Pierre Poilievre in the comments, he will be leading a majority government.
Oh my gosh, how are you so unequivocal about that? What do you know that the rest of us don't? Will the majority be more than by one?
At least one. That's all I can do.
Safe answer, JD. Safe answer. Judy?
I know that I don't want one. I'm the most of the Canadian electorate.
This is our thing.
This is, but I think the Canadian electorate doesn't want one. So whether or not there are more floor crossers, I think that's a possibility as well.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Guys, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you and your family. Thanks for making all the time for the analysis over the year. Nick Nanos, JD Bellavance, and Judy Trinh, our Sunday Scrum. That does do it for Question Period this year. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who worked so hard to put this show together. An amazing team led by Brendan McDonald, Spencer Van Dyke, and Stephanie Ha. There's also an entire crew of people behind the scenes here in Ottawa, in the control room and the edit suite, without whom this show would never be what it is, and I want to thank them for all their hard work as well. I also want to thank you for continuing to watch and for supporting accountability journalism. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you making us a part of your lives. We will most definitely be back in January. In the meantime, I want to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.